Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Quantum Spirituality on Dreamvisions 7 RadioNetwork.com, the show where past spiritual wisdom and present-day science merge to show us our future. Your host is Peter Canova, author of the 25-time award-winning book series, The First Souls Trilogy, available on Amazon, and Peter's website, petercanova.com. That's PeterCanova.com. This show is a live video, so if you're only listening and want to watch, go to Peter's website, petercanova.com. PeterCanova.com, where you can access his Facebook page to leave comments or questions, and click the D7RN link where you can receive a free gift video.
Hello, friends, followers, and listeners. I'm your host from Quantum Spirituality, Peter Canova. This is the show where the past and the present merge to unlock the mysteries of our future. I just want to remind our new listeners that you may want to go back and listen to the first 3 shows, because this show builds one episode on the other. It's kind of instructional in a way. And in the first 3 episodes in particular, we provide a framework to understand some of the issues that we speak of on quantum physics and on spirituality in the later episodes. So we have a great show lined up for you today. And without any further delay, please listen to it and enjoy. And join us every Tuesday, first Tuesday of every month, for Quantum Spirituality. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Quantum Spirituality on Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network. I'm your host, Peter Canova, and before we start the program tonight, I just want to give you a few reminders here. You can hear Dreamvisions 7 on any telephone connected to a Bluetooth device, or you can listen to it on your Amazon Echo by simply saying, Alexa, play Dreamvisions 7 radio. You can also access the video version of this show by going to my website, petercanova.com, and look for the link to the Dreamvisions 7 website page. And there you'll find a little button you can click, and you can see the video version of the show. Dreamvisions 7 is broadcast internationally on both radio and TV, and we hope that you're going to enjoy the show tonight. Now, a couple of other things. If you have any questions or comments on anything that you see or hear in the show, please go to my Facebook page, Peter Canova Author, where you can leave any comments or questions. And you could also do the same thing on my website, petercanova.com. That's PeterCanova.com. The website also contains a lot of information related to the topics that we talk about in the show, as well as some of the other works that I have done, some of the novels, and it has some information, I'm very excited to say this, about my forthcoming book, Quantum Spirituality, for which this program was named, and that should be out sometime next spring. So I want to talk a little bit about the program tonight. And Quantum Spirituality, if you've been following the podcast, really is about showing how quantum science reinforces things that were said over 2,000 or 3,000 years ago by ancient spiritual masters, spiritual mystics. And in case of this show, particularly the Gnostic Gospels, the Gnostic masters, the records that were recovered in Egypt in 1945, which gave us an insight into this amazing Judeo-Christian mystical sect that really were the scientists of their age. And they predicted so many features of modern quantum theory relating to the origin of the world, the origin of humanity, and just basically how things operate. And the program, the whole show really is about helping people to get a higher knowledge which they can use to transform their lives, because this show is not just theoretical. We discuss a lot of things here, but if you go back and look at the earlier shows, particularly the first 3 shows, where we kind of give the theoretical foundation of how all this stuff operates from both a quantum and a mystical standpoint, you'll see we thereafter lead into practical ways that you can incorporate this into your own life and your own spiritual practice, because theory is great, but it's only 50% of the equation. The rest of it is to put into practice so that it really has some tangible benefits in your life. And to that extent, the show that we're going to do tonight takes headlines, the latest headlines from today's news, coming out of the world of quantum physics, to show you how it supports the whole theory or premise or the beliefs in the old ancient Gnostic text. And why is this important? Well, it's important to help you build faith. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to build faith in the fact that so many of the things that you have heard, which can sound kind of abstract or remote, and yeah, that sounds interesting and that sounds all spiritual or religious or whatever, but how does it help me? I want you to be able to relate these findings and these theories of quantum science to show you that a lot of the things that you may have heard, that ancient spiritual wisdom and things like that, is not just a lot of new age BS. I don't really have a lot of patience for a lot of stuff I hear, new agey stuff, because it just sounds, there's a lot of aphorisms and adages and things like that. And, they all can be good and everything, but, they don't really help us. I mean, having me or anybody else just impart little pearls of wisdom, I don't know. It's going to only be of limited benefit to you. But I think that if you see how science and spirit come together to point to the same direction about fundamental things that should concern us, our origin, our destiny, where do we come from, where are we going, what is our purpose here, the heavy, deep questions of life. These are all things that can benefit ourselves both in this life and thereafter. And so they're really very, very important. And what I want to do by making these juxtapositions between science and mystical wisdom is to give you like this matrix of support so that you understand whatever you're working towards, it's not a bunch of baloney. It's not just some BS that people are slinging at you. There's very real things going on out there that aren't really obvious in our everyday world and to our normal consciousness. But the whole point is to open our eyes to a higher consciousness, so we can see these things and see how they work and see how we can make them work to make our lives better. So today's show is going to be really like kind of a newsreel, taking headlines, current headlines out of magazines, papers, and periodicals, and kind of showing you some of the remarkable things that science is starting to say and how they're coming around to conclusions that these spiritual mystics made over 3,000 years ago. Here are some of the basic principles of quantum spirituality. Consciousness creates reality. Consciousness creates matter through light energy. No objective reality exists apart from consciousness. Human minds co-create reality as part of a conscious matrix. The macrocosm reflects the microcosm. As it is above, so it is below. Everything is a single connected unity. And now let's hear what quantum science has to say about these things, as torn from the pages of the latest scientific journals and magazine articles.
The march of time. On 1,000 fronts, the history of the world moves swiftly forward. 1,000 new facts, new details in the world's history come into being every hour.
Let's go through this list of principles one by one. Consciousness creates reality. The headline here says, "Quantum physicist shows how consciousness can create reality." And it was taken from Mind Matters Natural and Artificial Intelligence News. Now, I don't want to bore you by reciting you the entire article. So what I'm going to do for each of these articles is give you the digest version, the bullet point version of what the articles are saying in relation to the particular topic. What does the physicist in this article say about how consciousness creates reality? He says that there are two levels of consciousness. One is experience. The other is the ability to reflect on that experience. He goes on to say that reflection equals representation, and representation equals will. Now, scientists use terminology from the fields of philosophy and science that people like us don't always quite understand. So I'm going to have to break down some of the terms that are used in this article so that you can better get what's being said here. Experience. Experience is energy or movement or volition. If you recall from prior shows, we talked about there being a static underlying state of reality. You can call that God, you can call that supreme consciousness or whatever, but it's everything all at one time. It's static. It doesn't really exactly undergo change. So in order to have experience by necessity has to mean change. It has to mean movement. It has to be a movement of energy towards something. So that energy or movement can lead to reflection, because reflection is the awareness or the ability to reflect on experience. So this is essentially the second quality of consciousness. There's just a pure movement of energy, which is experience, but to be able to reflect on that experience and be aware of it and draw conclusions of it is self-consciousness or reflection. Representations are perceptions of patterns, ideals, or archetypes. So in that whole process of experiencing and reflecting, there is we detect patterns, or we form ideas, and we've called these in previous shows archetypes. That's been the term that's universally been used in science and psychology and philosophy to describe patterns that human beings perceive through their self-reflection. And all this adds up to our ability to use will. And will is consciously directing this raw energy or movement to create new experience. So to sum it up, there is a raw energy that permeates existence. It comes from a source that we don't exactly know or can't exactly define, but it's there. And that is essentially what creates movement and experience and the visible universe. As a human being, we have the ability to reflect on those events, those experiences and energies, and that leads us to perceptions of patterns and ideals or archetypes, which we use for knowledge to then go ahead and have our will consciously create new experiences based on these patterns or experiences that we undergo. So the article goes on to explain that what underlies all of nature is will or volition, movement, which is a movement of energy not only to move, but to exist and experience itself moving and existing. In other words, part of consciousness is to be aware of itself undergoing change and experiences. So will or energy can manifest consciously or unconsciously. Nature is raw, unconscious energy with no conscious self-reflection. So for example, when a stone falls to earth, it has will or movement. It has direction, but no reflection. It falls, but it doesn't know it's falling. Nature experiences will as blind movement. Now, human minds, though, can reflect on movement and experience, and that gives rise to representations, which are perceptions or ideas and knowledge.
and human beings can then make plans and use will or intentionality to direct the energy towards new ends or movements or experiences. So it's like a self-perpetuating cycle. Human minds use raw energy from a universal source and influence it with their will or consciousness. And this is how the human mind participates in directing the flow of conscious reality. This is saying, and what we'll see in subsequent articles, is that there may not be any objective reality. It may all be a projection of the human mind. What the physicist is saying in this article about the ability of the human mind to create reality has been borne out in some previous material that we presented on this show, the double slit experiment, where it showed how human minds are capable of drawing particles into visible reality from light wave energy. The DNA experiments, where it showed how human DNA can actually organize photons in a random environment, and water crystal experiments that show how human thought and emotion can actually change the shape of crystals.
The prevailing belief among scientists, called superdeterminism, is that physical factors present from the Big Bang determine the reality of our universe. What this article is saying, contrary to that, is that it is the human consciousness that determines the direction and content and reality of our universe. Now, let's take our second principle of quantum spirituality. Consciousness creates matter through light energy. Government scientists are creating matter from pure light. This article appeared in numerous places around the internet, like Flipboard, Reddit, and other online news feeds. Specifically, scientists at Brookhaven Labs in Long Island created electrons, which are elementary particles of matter, from photons of light energy. Photons are the carriers of the light energy force in our universe. This experiment proved two major paradigms of reality, one expected and one unexpected. The expected event was that Einstein's E=mc² equation, stating that solid matter comes from non-material light energy, is absolutely correct, as the experiment proved. The unexpected finding of the experiment was that the path of light energy traveling through the vacuum of empty space is shaped, bent, or polarized by magnetic force fields in a process called birefringence. Don't you love how scientists take simple processes and make them sound as complicated as possible with words like birefringence? Anyway, this bending of light energy permeating space can be likened to the slide that we saw before the break, where the soul mind literally refracts or bends the light energy, alters the course of the original source energy, as we see here in this slide. Now, we know for a fact that the human brain and the human heart radiate an energy field, and that this energy field becomes even stronger during states of higher consciousness, like in meditation. So the question is, did this experiment merely replicate by physical means what the human mind accomplishes through consciousness? And to reinforce this point, you may remember the example we gave of the double slit experiment, which showed how human consciousness affects matter by non-physical means at the subatomic level. Now let's look at the third proposition of quantum spirituality, that there is no objective reality apart from consciousness. There's a couple of related articles here. The first one is from the Conversation magazine. It says, a new quantum paradox throws the foundation of observed reality into question. The second one is from Science magazine, and it says, new physics experiment indicates there's no objective reality. The scientific world frequently uses something called thought experiments, where they mentally construct a scenario and then conduct a series of tests trying to either prove or disprove that scenario. And one of these famous thought experiments is called WIGNERS friend, named after an Austrian physicist, Eugene Wigner, or he may have been Hungarian. Anyway, the articles that you just saw were really constructed around experiments built with the idea of Wigner's friend in mind. And I've got to tell you that if I tried to give you details of these experiments, it would just confuse you, because I got to tell you, I had to pore over these time after time after time just to, kind of get some comprehension. So I'm going to really simplify it for you here. But Wigner's friend experiment basically says, okay, we have two people, and one of them is in the room with a measuring device, and they're measuring some particle, whether it's a photon or whatever. And then there's somebody outside that room who is observing the friend inside, but otherwise has no contact with him. Now, we know that it's a fact that a particle, or something like a photon of light, in an unobserved state, it's supposed to be in superposition. That means it can hold the two contrary states at one time. So in other words, it can even have a vertical spin or a horizontal spin, both at the same time. It's really part of the light wave energy, or quantum wave, that permeates the universe, where it's basically all things and all possibilities at all times. Now, I know that's a little difficult to wrap your head around, but that's really what quantum physics indicates is out there. So the friend that is in the experimental laboratory there on the left, she is taking a measurement of a photon, and when you measure something, you collapse it from the energy state, from the light energy state, into an observable particle. So she can assign a definite state, either a position or a velocity, to that photon. However, the guy on the outside observing her is in a different reality, where those photons are not collapsed. They're all things at all times. So what you have essentially here is two different realities going on. One where in an unobserved state, like the guy on the right, who's not directly observing the action of the photons, his reality is that he's in a situation where those photons are all things at all times, all different states at all times, which is called superposition. Superposition means all states simultaneously. But the person on the inside of the lab has collapsed by observation, has collapsed that superpositioned photon into a definite particle, where either the velocity or the position of the particle can be measured. So basically what this is showing is that the whole idea of a reality is observer dependent, that there's no defined reality out there independent of the consciousness of the observer. I hope you were able to get that. I know it's a little bit complex, but remember, the person inside the lab is observing a little bit of a different version of reality relative to these photons of light than the person who is outside the lab looking in. For the person who is outside, that person on the inside of the lab has become essentially entangled with the particle, which entanglement is something that also happens in the world of quantum physics, where two particles can become related to one another, and then they affect one another at large distances. So in effect, the person inside of the lab is part of a large entanglement where there's a reality, a certain reality of what that particle is, whereas the guy on the outside is looking at the whole context there, and he's saying, well, from my point of view, I don't see this particle. This particle is out there, or it's part of a light wave energy which permeates everything. But that's my reality out here. So you can see it's a kind of a tricky and a little bit of a mind-bending thing. But these series of experiments that were performed around the WIGNERS friend thought idea here really, demonstrate that it certainly seems that the whole nature of reality is dependent on our consciousness rather than having an independent, objective existence. This third article here from Science Magazine kind of states it in a simple sentence. There is no way to define a reality that is independent of the way we choose to look at it.
Okay, it's that time for a short commercial break. This is Quantum Spirituality on Dreamvisions 7 Radio. I'm your host, Peter Canova, and you can go to my website, petercanova.com, that's petercanova.com, where you can get the link to watch the video version of this podcast and also get a lot of information that we can't always cover on any individual program. So we'll be back shortly with a lot of more interesting news. Don't go away. Keep that dial tuned.
The First Souls Trilogy, one of the most highly awarded fictional independent book series on the market, is a grand vision of human evolution. It chronicles the first spirit consciousness to enter the material world in 3 page-turning novels that introduce a new paradigm of reality based on genuine ancient wisdom and quantum science. These inspirational thrillers will force you to rethink the nature of the world in which we live. Visit the petercanova.com website for information and ordering. In a world facing annihilation, a miraculous African nun rises to become the first female pope through a web of war, murder, and betrayal. Loved by some, hated by many, she becomes the deadly target of Islamic terrorists and her own cardinals as she introduces a new vision that will either save humanity or accelerate its destruction. 4 people must race against a nuclear holocaust to learn her astonishing secret. Pope Annalisa is available at petercanova.com, Amazon, and other online booksellers and bookstores worldwide.
Why are we here? How can we be happy? Questions asked from millennials to boomers. Crappy to Happy, Sacred Stories of Transformational Joy answers them using true stories of grit, grace, and love. James Redfield, author of The Celestine Prophecy, wrote in the foreword, "This book is a seminar about emerging truths and offers grounded solutions through the art of the comeback." Dr. Bernie Siegel, a contributing author, wrote, "Bodies die, but spirits and consciousness survive and recycle." So, grab some tissues, open your book, and prepare to cry and laugh till it heals. Crappy to Happy by Reverend Ariel Patricia and Kathleen O'Keefe Canavas. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and booksellers worldwide.
How did life start on Earth, and why is there so much suffering? Are we living in a simulated reality like the characters in the Matrix movie? Do parallel dimensions exist alongside ours, influencing our experience? What are the mysterious dark energies that penetrate our universe? Peter Canova folds space and time to bring the twin bookends of ancient wisdom and quantum science into a single focal point, answering these and many other deep mysteries of the creation. Quantum Spirituality can be heard every Tuesday at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern and 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Pacific on syndicated Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network. See the show where past and present merge to show us our future.
This is Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back to Quantum Spirituality on Dreamvision7radio.com. I'm your host, Peter Canova, and you can find out more about me at petercanova.com. That's PeterCanova.com. And please, if you enjoy the show and have any questions or comments for me, leave them on my Facebook page, Peter Canova Author, or also you can leave comments on my website. So today we're discussing the latest news from the scientific world as it relates to subjects we talk about on quantum spirituality.
The next article from Neural AI News and Analysis gets even more radical on the subject of humans creating reality. The title of the article is Theoretical Physicists Think Humans Are Screwing Up the Universe's Plan. I'm a god, you're a god, everybody gets to be a god. Why they put Bill Murray in there, I'm not sure. Probably to add a little bit of humor to some kind of heavy subject, probably a clip from Ghostbusters or something. The two key points in the article are that human free will is the sole known entity in the universe capable of eliciting change based on conscious reflection. The result of our existence is that the universe's entire trajectory is potentially changed. Whatever the particles in the universe were going to do before humanity emerged, their course has been altered. So let me give you a visual representation of what this is all saying. If you look on the left-hand side, you have God or the source of energy, and all those kind of colored lines are the energy that permeates all creation, the pure energy that permeates all creation. And according to the various traditions that we track in this show, God or the source produced other points of consciousness called spirit. There was a break from the spiritual plane into the soul plane, because soul is where the spirits departed to pursue their own interests, to pursue their own destinies, as opposed to keeping within the collective orbit of the source's plan. And the souls then, further seeking experience, wanted to go into physical form, and they basically came into human existence. So the human mind is kind of got bits and pieces of everything that preceded it, and that's where it derives its creative power from. So collectively speaking, that original stream of energy that we talked about, the volition, the will, the energy, the experience, the desire for to progress and move, became altered through all these various intermediate energies. But collectively, this is what produces the physical objects of our world. So all these different things that we experience in our 3D world are actually co-created images of light energy, and we're part of that whole filtration system that led to the universal condition. Now, the idea of the universe or cosmos being shaped by intermediary beings, whether you want to call them angels or souls or human mind, depending on your orientation, is buried deep within the traditions of almost every major religion. In the Jewish tradition, you have the Megarians, who believe that angels created the world. In the Gnostic tradition, you have the Sophia myth, which we've gone over quite extensively on this program before, where it shows that there was a break from the spirit dimension into a lower dimension that resulted in the material world. And then you have the writings of the very early church fathers who were taught at the feet of the apostles, one of them being Papias, who claimed, again, like the Jewish tradition and Gnostic traditions, that other beings, intermediary beings, which he called angels, created the world. And finally, you have the readings of the famous American psychic Edgar Cayce. And Cayce was, I found it very fascinating, and a lot of the work that I've done is very similar to Casey's findings. Casey basically said that the universal energy, whether you want to call it God or the source, was like a stream. And the angels or spirits that were created by God were to be like ministers in helping God's plan, unfolding plan, in shaping the stream. However, what they did was they actually jumped into the stream and immersed it and went downhill with it and changed its course. So here again, you have the idea, like in the current article that we're talking about, humans screwing up the universe. There seems to be this almost like universal belief that somewhere along the line, source energy was diverted or affected by the actions of other beings, and those other beings ultimately devolved into ourselves, our human minds. This whole story of the creation gone astray is actually the core theme of my trilogy, the First Souls trilogy, and in particular, it's described in detail in the fictional book, The Light of Distant Suns. So, although this is a shameless plug for the book, for those of you who are interested in this particular topic, you can get a pretty good background, a synthesis of all the various traditions that I just spoke about, discussing this story about the intermediary creative powers in the book.
Let's look at the fifth proposition of quantum spirituality. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. As it is above, so it is below. As it is above, so it is below is an ancient aphorism from the Hermetic Egyptian tradition. But what does it mean exactly? It means that our bodies, minds, and the material world at large all reflect patterns in operation at higher frequencies or levels of consciousness. So let me give you some examples of this statement. One is fractals. A fractal is a never-ending pattern. Fractals are infinitely complex patterns that are self-similar across different scales. They are created by repeating a simple process over and over in an ongoing feedback loop. Some of the most common examples of fractals in nature would include branches of trees, animal circulatory systems, snowflakes, lightning, and electricity. There's also plants, leaves, geographic terrain, river systems, clouds, and crystals. Even human beings are composed of many different types of fractals woven into each other, each with parts which have different fractal dimensions. Let me give you a visual example of a fractal. What you're looking at is a head of broccoli filmed in close up. What you can see is that it's composed of tiny units that look very similar, almost exactly the same to one another, and this is an example of fractals in nature. Self-repeating patterns that are very small in scale that make up larger objects. So we can summarize this phenomenon by saying that our bodies, minds, and the material world all reflect patterns in operation at higher or more fundamental levels of consciousness. A significant event occurred in the year 1980. This fractal pattern found in nature was reduced to a mathematical formula that yielded a master geometric pattern called the Mandelbrot set, which is pictured here and named after its discoverer, Benoit Mandelbrot. This was a revolutionary discovery that illuminated a profound reality beneath our common sensory experience. If you had an infinitely adjustable microscope, no matter where you zoom onto on this set or image, you will see nearly the exact same image replicated at a smaller scale. There is an infinite number of these images, each containing an infinite number of more images. All are similar, yet each is individual. This is critical, and I'll explain that distinction in a minute. Now, any scientist will tell you that this is real. It actually proves that there is an infinity. It exists just like you or me, and it shows that we are living in an infinite context. The Mandelbrot set allows us to perceive and explore the nature of the infinity of which we are part of, and it indicates we live in a forever matrix of freedom and infinite choices. The fact that the images within images are closely similar but not exactly the same is not only proof of the aphorism "as it is above, so it is below," but it's a direct confirmation of the Gnostic creation story we covered in detail in our earlier shows and is one of the foundational concepts of this podcast. The Gnostics said that a supreme consciousness projected other points of consciousness in a pattern that created infinite dimensions, each one generating another one, similar but not exactly the same, because each new iteration possessed its own individuality and it had free will. This ancient mystical statement was the basis for "as it is above, so it is below," the Hermetic Egyptian saying, as well as being a non-mathematical statement several thousand years ago of the Mandelbrot equation. The Mandelbrot set has been called God's thumbprint because many see it as a confirmation that God or consciousness is projecting this world from the inside out, essentially projecting a digital reflection of its imagination and desires, just as the ancient Gnostics and other mystics said. This is also evidence that points towards the possible existence of parallel dimensions, or the many worlds theory in physics, something that people are aware of on a popular basis, and that the Gnostics, again, predicted and said was part of reality several thousand years ago. Another example of how the large and the small, or the higher and the lower, reflect one another is found in the way that electrons arrange themselves around the nucleus, the same way that planets arrange themselves around the sun. Now, you notice I say arranged and not orbit, and even though it says orbitals in here, the old model of the atom, the nucleus being at the center and the atoms or the electrons rotating around it like planets in the sun is a little bit dated. What we now know is that the electrons exist in kind of like cloud-like sectors that do arrange around the nucleus that don't necessarily orbit it in the exact same way that the planets do. But still, the image is the same. You have a central system such as the sun or such as the nucleus here at the subatomic level, and you have the entities that aggregate around it, like the electrons will aggregate around a nucleus, or the planets will aggregate around the sun. In keeping with everything that we've just discussed, this headline from the University of Bologna says, "Does the human brain resemble the universe?" Scientists at the University of Bologna investigated the similarities between two of the most challenging and complex systems in nature, the cosmic network of galaxies and the network of neuronal cells in the human brain, and the conclusion they reached is as follows. Once again, structural parameters have identified unexpected agreement levels. Probably the connectivity within the two networks evolves following similar physical principles, despite the striking and obvious difference between the physical powers regulating galaxies and neurons. Finally, this article from The Conversation relates the fact that scientists believe that they have detected black holes at the subatomic level. Now, that would be a real indication, physical indication, of how the macrocosm is reflected in the microcosm. As it is above, so it is below. The evidence really piles up. Okay, the final principle or proposition we're going to consider today relative to the headlines is that everything is a single connected unity. One article here says that brains might sync as people interact, while a scientifically controlled study at the German University of Kassel has shown that the chest area of an average person emits only 20 photons of light per second, but somebody who meditates on that heart center, sending out love and light to others, emits an amazing 100,000 photons of light per second. That's 5,000 times more than the average human being. They say that the heart loves, feels, thinks, and remembers and communicates with other hearts. The studies show that not only do people synchronize heart rates and breathing when watching things like emotional film together, but people also seem to synchronize their neural brain rhythms. When people cooperated during common tasks, their neural brain rhythms aligned. Interestingly enough, these neural oscillation patterns aligned when people were doing cooperative tasks, but not when they were doing competitive tasks. Coming at things from a quantum angle, scientists have actually observed two particles exchanging identities before flying away from one another. Now, we've discussed several times in the show the phenomenon of entanglement, where two particles literally become related in such a way that they can instantly communicate with each other faster than the speed of light and at vast distances apart from one another. There have also been experiments where they have subjects that are miles apart, and they are in a meditative state, and when one of them is shown something that is violent and has a reaction, the measuring devices that record their heart rates and things like that oscillate at the exact same rate of the person who is not there but is meditatively linked to them. So there's abundant evidence out there that shows that we are part of a conscious matrix and we are linked with everything else. And if you think that that connectedness applies only to organic beings, we have discussed a couple of times in the show the growing scientific belief in panpsychism, that everything in the universe contains some degree or some level of consciousness that would bind it together. It's time for another break. Don't go away. I'm your host, Peter Canova, and you're listening to Quantum Spirituality on Dreamvision7radio.com. We'll be right back.
The First Souls Trilogy, one of the most highly awarded fictional independent book series on the market, is a grand vision of human evolution. It chronicles the first spirit consciousness to enter the material world in 3 page-turning novels that introduce a new paradigm of reality based on genuine ancient wisdom and quantum science. These inspirational thrillers will force you to rethink the nature of the world in which we live. Visit the petercanova.com website for information and ordering. In a world facing annihilation, a miraculous African nun rises to become the first female pope through a web of war, murder, and betrayal. Loved by some, hated by many, she becomes the deadly target of Islamic terrorists and her own cardinals as she introduces a new vision that will either save humanity or accelerate its destruction. 4 people must race against a nuclear holocaust to learn her astonishing secret. Pope Annalisa is available at petercanova.com, Amazon, and other online booksellers and bookstores worldwide.
What if dreams can diagnose your life? What if we can meet the love of our life in dreams? Join host Kat O'Keefe Canovis, the #1 internationally best-selling author of Dreams That Can Save Your Life, written with Duke University medical doctor Larry Berg. Dreaming Healing is where we'll explore dreams, research, and interpret dreams from you, the caller. Dreaming Healing shows can be heard every Tuesday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, with live shows on the first and third evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific Time on syndicated Dreamvision 7 Radio Network. Come live your dreams out loud with Kat.
How did life start on Earth, and why is there so much suffering? Are we living in a simulated reality like the characters in the Matrix movie? Do parallel dimensions exist alongside ours, influencing our experience? What are the mysterious dark energies that penetrate our universe? Peter Canova folds space and time to bring the twin bookends of ancient wisdom and quantum science into a single focal point, answering these and many other deep mysteries of the creation. Quantum Spirituality can be heard every Tuesday at 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern and 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Pacific on syndicated Dreamvisions 7 radio network. See the show where past and present merge to show us our future.
This is Dreamvisions 7 radio network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back to the last segment of our Quantum Spirituality Show on syndicated Dreamvisions7radio.com. And I'm your host, Peter Canova. You can listen to the show anytime online, on your phone, in cars with Bluetooth, and through Amazon's Echo by asking Alexa, play Dreamvision 7 Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, please leave it on my website, petercanova.com, where you can also link to my Facebook page to comment. On our show today, we examine some of the ideas that underpin quantum spirituality, which is really the merger of science and spiritual wisdom. And we took headlines from breaking news about science in order to demonstrate some of the truth behind these propositions. I know that we covered a lot of material today, and you may be suffering from download overload. So what I want to do is summarize everything that we've talked about and try and bring it down to a point where it's really meaningful for us in a practical sense to understand what all this seeming complexity really leads to for us personally. It starts with a static, unchanging core of consciousness. All one can say about it is that it exists, and it's aware. But existing is not enough. It wants to be, to become, and that means to create motion, to experience. It projects itself outward into individual points of awareness in successive infinite waves or iterations. And like we saw in the repetitive nature hidden in the Mandelbrot set, each wave contains the image of the one that preceded it, no matter how it's viewed. Similar, but not exactly the same, for each iteration is an individual consciousness, spirit, or dimension of existence. This is why the Bible said we are made in the image of God. Not the same, but with a similar pattern of consciousness that we can purify and make more conscious, more godlike. And this ability to reflect on experience is what distinguishes us from lower forms of consciousness. The medium that enables all this creative movement is light energy. Light energy permeates all creation, visible and invisible. Light contains the consciousness of its source, which is intelligence, which is direction. Light can discern and add an unlimited variety of forms to the mural of creation. Everything we experience as a physical object is merely one frequency or state of light energy, as Einstein's famous formula E=mc² tells us. Light energy not only forms physical objects, light provides the very means by which we perceive the objects around us. What makes each consciousness, each being, each dimension, or each thing different is the frequency or the degree of light energy consciousness it possesses. Humans are unique in that they can reverse engineer their existence by raising their conscious vibration. Scientists were even able to replicate the creation of matter by mechanistic manipulation of light in experimental environments, but this pales in comparison to the energy of consciousness contained in the creative powers of the collective human mind. We've said that humans co-create reality. How is this so? Because light energy is the fundamental condition of the creation, and humans are a conscious part of that creation, humans contribute to the flow of the light stream that forms reality. Like water flowing down from a pure mountain source, the volume of light, like the volume of water, diminishes, and so we are not conscious of the collective power we exert in shaping reality. But we are also multidimensional creatures. At the higher levels of our light being, before merging our minds into physical consciousness, we possess considerable creative energies. Even though we were, as sacred texts described, fallen from a higher state, each of us contributed to bending the course of the one energy and shaping the world as we know it. A mixed world of light and shadow, of beauty and tragedy that reflected our differing levels of consciousness. But can all these things we've said be real? Is there really a source of which we are a part? The only way for you to truly experience these things as a reality is within the realm of your own mind, and that is up to you to study, meditate, and contemplate. What we provide here are target concepts for your contemplation. But what we can tell you is that science, not just mysticism, has shown that the universe is a product of light energy. Even more than that, science has shown the existence of infinity, not as an abstraction, but as a reality that has been reduced to a geometric pattern of similar, repetitive images linked to one another to form the totality of everything we know. This pattern is present in all nature, including the organic structure of human beings. As all things eventually return to their source, infinity is like a loop upon which we ride in the light stream of creation, having different experiences in different states of creation. The reality of infinity puts us one step closer to the God or source of all things we previously had to use faith and imagination to comprehend. We may never fully grasp its essence, but like a beacon in the night or a guiding star, we know it's there. A repetitive pattern of similarities at all levels of size, from the visible to the invisible. The microcosm reflects the macrocosm. As it is above, so it is below. And this is why the Bible has said that we were made in God's image. In light of all we've heard today, it's fair to raise the ages-old question, what exactly are we? Let's go back a couple of centuries to an argument between two famous philosopher-mathematicians, Isaac Newton and Carl Leibniz. Here we have two spheres representing space and time, and within lie the contents of the universe. Newton claimed space and time acted like a container for the contents of the universe. That is, if we could remove all the contents, all the planets, stars, galaxies, and everything else, we would be left with empty space and time. This is the absolute mechanistic view of space and time. Leibniz, on the other hand, claimed that space and time is dependent on the sum total of distances and durations between all the objects and events of the world. If we remove the contents of the universe, we would remove space and time itself. There are only spatial and temporal or time relationships between objects and events. This is the relational view of space and time. Now let's fast forward to an article that came out in Conversation this month. The headline describes reality as quantum mirrors. It says most of us buy into Newton's assumption, expecting objects to have their own independent existence, independent of us and any other objects. And that's actually a deep-rooted assumption that we make about the world. But physicist Carl Rovelli tells us that quantum theory shows this view to be false, like in an endless game of quantum mirrors. Our existence is a unified interrelation of light energies connected to or playing off one another, supporting Leibniz's view. Score this round for Leibniz. We showed previously that scientists created matter manipulating light. Now, the University of Glasgow has created a hologram people can touch. Is it really a stretch to now say that we may well be our own holographic projections in a universal light show a la Star Trek, as we claimed all along in this program? Until next time, contemplate on this. We've come to the end of our show. A big thanks to our producer, Bob. Please join me again every Tuesday of each month. This show will be archived on my Dreamvision 7 network page, accessible from my website, petercanova.com. That's petercanova.com. And until next time, remember, quantum spirituality is where the past and the present, where mysticism and science merge to show us our future. I want to remind followers of quantum spirituality that the thematic content of this show is available in page-turning fictional form in the first Souls trilogy, winner of 25 literary awards, including Nautilus, Eric Hoffer, and Writer's Digest, as well as the Indie Next Generation Award for Best Book Series. The books are available at all online booksellers. For all fans of the show, I'm happy to announce that Quantum Spirituality will be available in book form this coming spring, published by Inner Traditions and distributed by Simon & Schuster. This is the book that connects all the dots and details of material covered in this podcast. It presents original views of reality and human origins, spiritual history, and the latest scientific findings that support the view that science and spirituality are twin lenses focused on the same truths of existence.
This ends today's segment of Quantum Spirituality, the show where the past and present merge to show us our future. Join us the first Tuesday of each month for cutting-edge information and informative new episodes. This show will be archived on the Quantum Spirituality Dreamvisions 7 Radio Network website page, also accessible at petercanova.com. That's petercanova.com.
This is Dreamvision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.